trying to get it closer for us, so I'm not sure it'll work. I don't think it's anything bright enough. Maybe I should put my notes on. Okay, here's another one of those words. You'll know immediately there's an issue with this word here. S-U-N-T-E-L-E-S-O. Sun telos. Sun telos. So we know what a telos is. The telos is a limit, or a limit of a goal, or a limit, especially and specifically the horizon, but it applies. It is a limit. In the Greek worldview, it's like a limit of an equation, but it's a word that's used over and over and over again in Greek. It can mean, I think I've got the list down there for you, but the point aimed as a limit, the conclusion of an act or state, result, an impost or levy, like for example, pay, to pay. And soon, well you know soon, right? Like synagogue. Synagogue, soon means basically together. Together, telos. And our wonderful translators translate this word for us to be end, finish, fulfill, make. Do you see it could be a problem with that? You know, what's astounding to me is you get these beautiful words, these words in Greek that are just so fundamentally outstanding, and they get turned in our translations into mush. You know, just something that has almost no meaning except some. It's like, you know, when I was in the military, we wrote an OER, an Officer Efficiency Report, and you know, the one thing we tried to get out of that was all the words like, you know, wonderful and great and this and that. It's like you never can get rid of them. So, you know, you're full of these words that are meaningless, and what you really want are words that are meaningful. We'll see in context that this is a very meaningful word within the context of the writing. But translating it as end, finish, fulfill, and make completely are derogatory to the word. And for example, we know, right? If I wanted to say that in Greek, I mean, I could say a good word for end would be telos itself. But why sun telos? Why make it so specific that it's a different kind of word, right? Like synagogue, you know, getting together, meeting together with a leader, synagogue. Why leave off the sun? Well, it's a meaningless word, right? It changes the word's meaning entirely. And another word, this is a very interesting word because, let's see, memphhomenos. Sure, mymphomina, I think. Well, what are the correct pronunciation of the ph, which is a hard ph. It is a primary verb that means to blame. To blame. Now, it's not so grossly mistranslated, but the King James translates this word as find fault. But it's not found very often anywhere else in the New Testament. But what's interesting is, number one, this is a primary. In other words, I mean, it doesn't look like a primary, does it? It looks like it has some prefix and suffix point, but it's not. This is a primary word. Now, okay, look in the English. The English word is blame. Okay, word with friends, Scrabble. Is that a long word or a short word? It's a pretty short word in English, right? But look in the Greek word. Is that a long word or a short word? Now, what do you, okay, in English, if I throw out a long word to you in English, what does that usually mean?
Having trouble figuring it out.
It's put together, yeah.
It's usually a compound, or maybe it's a word that came from a foreign language, or maybe it's a late verb, or a late, especially as a verb. We like our verbs. Yeah, is, run, even walk, right? Blame. You know, if you looked at words in terms of, okay, the short ones are first, right? As you're, okay, caveman speak. Ugh. Right? So the shorter they are, probably the earlier they are. As they get longer, that means they're probably later verbs. Look at this one. This is a pretty long verb. I mean, it's got like 1, 2, 3 bunches. This is so long you're not going to spell it in the Scrabble, right? So the big deal is this is a primary verb, and it means to blame. Doesn't have any more stronger meaning. However, how specific do you think this word is? We know Greek is concrete, but how specific do you think this word is? I mean, if you use this with your kids, would you be serious or unserious? Really serious, right? Whenever you use a kid's full name, you're serious. Whenever you have a big, long verb that you throw at them, it's like they can't understand what you mean, but they know the tone of your voice, right? So my point is this. This doesn't seem to be that complex of a verb, but yet to translate it as to find fault seems very odd to me. Because what do you do when you translate? You always... Do you put a prepositional phrase or a phrase in, or a compound structure when a smaller word will fit? You always go for a smaller word, right? Matter of fact, they go for smaller words when they shouldn't. But here's their opportunity, and what did they do? They made it a compound. I'm just pointing this out. We'll see in context because this fits right in what we're talking about. So, we were going to Logos to Telos that we're looking at right now is the author's key point is we have, okay, you know, it's not as important to us today. I think it is important to us. The ultimate question of Hebrews is, I'm not a Jew, does this apply to me? And I think that really is it. I think that's an important question for a society. You know, our society has really gone away from the idea even that there is sin or that there's, you know, badness in the world. I mean, I think we've got a really interesting society. You see the front page of the paper? Some poor girl, you know, a student, college student, overdosed on a drug. Now, would you go to a party and somebody gave you a drug and you go, hey, here's a drug, I don't know what it is, but go ahead and take it? Would you do that? No. I mean, that's like chewing Tide packages, right? It's not the wisest thing to do. It's just not even a good idea. It's like, this is outside of the... I mean, if you go to a party, in those kind of parties, you don't even want to drink an alcoholic drink because somebody might have put something funny in it, right? But you're doing drugs. I mean, what a peculiar view of society. So we have people today that don't even have a concept of wrongdoing or what is right and wrong. What a horrific concept. I think they had similar problems in this early century, but they had at least progressed to the point where they were asking, what can I do about it? Right? I mean, what are we missing in our culture today that people are so stupid they won't ask a question, or won't even think about it? You know, is there something wrong?
I'll be one of those stupid people.
Okay.
You made this comment a couple times that Hebrews is very important to the non-Jew. And you went through an elaborate proof text with Melchizedek that your wife loves. That why isn't it even more important to the Jew that Jesus was not of the son of Aaron? And that would have been a disqualifying factor, but this same proof text applies to the Jews that he is a bona fide, he is the Savior by proof text. So why is it not just as important to the Jew as it is to the non-Jew? That's a stupid question.
No, that's a great question, Meg. I didn't even thought about that. What a beautiful observation. You heard what his point was, right? I'll try to make it as clear as possible. The point was that Melchizedek not only applied to the Gentiles as a priest, but also to the Jews. Because, and you know, this really is applicable because, you know, for example, any of the Maccabees have applied within this context. Not really, you know. The Maccabees were of Levites, but they weren't of Aaron, but they claimed to be high priest, right, and king. So, you know, it is interesting. What is fantastic to me is, what is interesting to me is, we are, you know, when I grew up in school, I was steeped in philosophy. You know, when I was going through school, I don't know if it's the schools I went through, but, you know, I actually had a class in philosophy when I was in high school. And when I was reading, and even the classes when I was early on, they talked about philosophy, they talked about, you know, philosophical things, and I actually had to do papers. You know, I know that I think this is late. People should be doing papers earlier than this. But in 6th grade, I remember the first paper I had to do, right? I think I did it on the Black Death, right? Bubonic plague. And I'm just saying that, you know, I think I think not everyone, but I think in my generation still a lot of people were steeped in the ideas of philosophy and whatever. And so we're questioning. I mean, I was questioning my whole life until I got late in life, and I always want to know, what did the Greek really say? Right? When I read my Bible and I started reading it, and I learned that it had been written in Greek and Hebrew, and I want to know, what does it say? And finally, after years and years, I got to a point where I could actually answer my own questions, right? And that's why I try to give this class to help you answer that question. But I think I don't think you're specifically unique, but I worry about our culture, that we don't have a culture that thinks, you know, that's thinking about philosophy. Because if you're thinking about philosophy, that's what these guys were doing, right? In Hebrews. They were at least thinking about philosophy, and they're thinking about, well, what's wrong with the world? Right? And I'm not sure that I get this perception. Maybe it's the mass media fake news, but I don't get a perception, because every murderer was a good guy, right? Right? You notice that in the paper? He was a great guy. He was a great neighbor, right?
He was turning his life around.
Oh, he was turning his life around. Yeah, and every a person who's a druggie, it's like every druggie, you know, was a great person. They're great. Well, maybe the drugs gave him a great person. I don't know. You know, I'm thinking, this is whacked. This is twisted, right? Because they're not. Right? There's something wrong fundamentally, and you ought to be asking the question. The paper ought to be saying, this is not the way to live, right? And asking that question, but it's like, maybe underneath it all, people are asking this question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go on a track. This is almost theological, right? Go on a theological track. But it worries me, because I think the Hebrews are asking the right question. Does this apply to me? There's hope, right? And the answer is, well, we think, right? The Logos to tell us the answer is, yeah, there is hope. This applies to you. So anyway, let's see how it does.
Well, they should have known by then, by the time this was written, how insufficient and error-prone and like everything that their system was. That it had been, you know, there was the Essenes that disagreed, and there's the temple in Alexandria, and the temple in Jerusalem is destroyed, and like they needed something better than what they had. So I think that's maybe sort of answer to his question: why should they care as much as the Gentiles? Because they needed something better, obviously, than what they had, because it wasn't working.
This all applies, because this is a lead up. If you've read ahead, you know this. Yes, ma'am. Do you have a question?
No. I think that Hebrews has always been a proof for the Jews that Jesus fulfilled all the requirements of the Messiah. And that's why, you know, and Melchizedek was a priest and king that Abraham gave allegiance to, or at least honored as with his gift of a tithe, you know. So I don't think that Jews would question that he wasn't a Jew, because the father of their whole nation respected him. So I think they knew that. They didn't take offense or think that didn't apply to them. But Hebrews goes through and answers the prophecies and says, you know, this is this man, this Jesus that died and rose again, he fulfills all these. He is the Messiah that you're looking for.
I think you're right. I think that's absolutely correct. I think what even more is even more interesting is that this applies. You know, I told you, this doesn't appear to me to be written to the Hebrews. This appears to be written to all those guys and gals, right, in that area. Now, let me throw something out. This is applicable. This isn't going down a rabbit track. I'm trying not to go down rabbit tracks. Okay, remember, this should be embedded in your memory. I wish this was embedded in more people's memory because it seems like we don't like to talk about this either in church or in school for some reason. But we always start with animism. We go to pantheonic paganism. Why? You know, I told you, the big step here is literature, right? Literature is what moves you. Why do you think you go? Why do you think as a culture, why does a whole culture go from animism to pantheonic paganism? It's because animism isn't sufficient to explain. Animism, yeah,
It's not logical either.
well, in pantheonic paganism, I get what kind of gods? I get gods of,
That reflects
They're very
human
except for
nature.
the Greek and Roman gods that are.
yeah, not just human nature though, not just human nature, okay? I have a god of iron. I have a god of music. I have a goddess of wisdom or learning. Because what does animism... Do you find books laying around out the rocks? Do you find musical instruments or music laying around in the rocks? Now, you do find iron laying around in the rocks, but does it take something to get it out? So, animism is not sufficient. So when you go to when you become literate, you move from animism to pantheonic paganism because animism doesn't fulfill the needs that pantheonic paganism suddenly does. Now, you move from pantheonic paganism to mysterion. That step is basically philosophy. Why? What am I missing that pantheonic paganism does not answer?
Reason and examination. I think that's where people are starting to apply the reason and examination, like you were discussing earlier with philosophy, examining.
You get, in pantheonic paganism, I get things that keep repeating. They're repetitious. So the question I ask as a pantheonic pagan is, what does that mean? That the God is there always making it happen? And your answer is, well, it can't be because the gods in a pantheonic paganism, in animism, where are the gods? Do you think there are any animistic gods in this room? Do you see any living things? Any rocks? There's wood. There's wood. Oh boy, I hope that dryad is not mad.
Did you kill it?
Yeah, right? As I go to pantheonic paganism, though, are the gods infinite and omnipotent and no?
No.
And they have flawed character.
Yeah.
They don't have the character of a god. They're flawed beings.
Well,
God says we know.
Well, we would
They're
say
just
that.
as bad as us, but with more power, which is worse.
which is kind of scary, right? That's like a game or something. Yeah. But you go to Mysterion because you get stuff and you say, well, does that mean, I can do the mystery the same way all the time, right? But does that mean the gods are here? No, the gods are there and there and there. And the god, I saw the statue of Zeus over there. So how could he be doing this? How can he cure, for example, the fever in Peter's mother-in-law, right? Cursed his mother-in-law. Anyway, so when science appears, though, I go to Gnosticism. Okay, science. I move to Gnosticism because what's insufficient? It's not the gods. It's not mysteries. All of a sudden I understand through science what it is. So again, this is insufficient. So now apply this to Hebrews. The people in Alexandria, they're Mysterion folks. They reached the Mysterion. What are they grappling with right now in their culture? The movement to Gnosticism. But does Gnosticism exist yet? No, Gnosticism does not exist. Guess what? Christianity created Gnosticism. This has been a problem that Christianity created. And you know, all those Eastern religions, they did not invent their Gnosticism. All of their Gnostic ideas came out of Christianity, which is really funny that Christianity was the father of Gnosticism. But in spite of that, Christianity is not a Mysterion and not Gnostic. And when this was given to the people in the Hebraic era, right, the Jews were looking for the answer because of the 36 things that were unforgivable, and almost all of them. Okay, when I'm in Alexandria after 70 A.D., can I be forgiven for even unintentional sin?
No, because the temple was destroyed, so the legitimate place to sacrifice is gone.
Exactly. Now, the priests that are running the temple in Alexandria will tell you,
Sure, well, we're doing the best we can.
You got the temple here.
yeah, we got a temple. We got a temple here. Come on down, right? But then the next question that you would ask as a Jew, really, or as a person, well, why does yours work, but the Aphrodite one doesn't? It works too, right? And what about Osiris and Mithras, and right? They say they all work, and yet the message from the Hebrews, the message the Hebrews gives us, answers this problem. And answers the problem of the Hebrews at the same time, right? What does it mean to me? I mean, that's the ultimate question. What does Jesus mean to me? I mean, that's okay, a theological question.
But until that bridge was crossed, my point was, if the Jews, till they understood the relationship between Melchizedek, Jesus was disqualified. He didn't meet all the requirements to be
A priest.
Messiah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not discounting that it was very important to the non-Jews, but what my question to you, wasn't it just as important to the Jews?
I think it is too. I think it is. I think you're right on. I think the problem became, and this is why Hebrews as a late date document is wonderful, because it lets us have a worldview. Okay, the original worldview of the disciples and of the original, Christianity as it moved out into the Mediterranean was Christ has died, Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And that was sufficient. Because everybody goes, whoa, who has ever come back from death? Remember, I told you there's no words for it. Nobody in the Greek myths, no one in the Osirian myths, there is no one in the myth until Christ that came back from death. Period. Dot. Didn't happen. Anyway, so when you have this guy coming back from death, the answer is Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. It's easy. But then what happened later on? People say, is that it? Is that all? What's the basis for it, right? And so I go from those, remember when they went to talk and it said that 1/3 agreed or 1/3 accepted? 1/3 said, I want to hear some more about it, and 1/3 said, go home, right? The 1/3 that still want to hear more about it, that's Hebrews. That's who Hebrews was targeting. The Jews that said, okay, I thought about it, but Jesus can't be a priest, right? And to the Gentiles, you go, I thought about it. But, how did the sacrifice work? How could the sacrifice do any... And for the Gnostics, those who are turning Gnostic, right? How could that's what we hear today, bloody Christianity. Why does there need to be a sacrifice of anything? And I think I point them out to C.S. Lewis, who makes it so beautiful and easy to conceive, right? But that's in the modern era. This is C.S. Lewis for the first century, but not as entertaining, right? Just the way we are, we have to make analogies that makes it easy for us to understand. Anyway, with this background, I mean, this is not fallacious what we're talking about. And by the way, I try to lead you always into conversation that should support what we're talking about. So, huh?
Well, do you have any idea how the Jews thought there could be a prophet, priest, and king? If the priest had to be of the line of Aaron and of Levi, but the son of David had to be of the line of Judah, I mean, it seems like for years there would have been this problem of how do you have somebody who meets the criteria of the Messiah?
Well, that's why it says, and I can't remember which, I think it's in Mark, it says, Jesus Christ himself said, you have had a Messiah in every age. And the point was that since the Maccabees, they had agreed that the Maccabees were their Messiah. But yet the Maccabees weren't in the lineage of David or in the lineage of Aaron. Yet they accepted them. Okay? It was kind of a forceful acceptance. It got so bad that the Jews later on in the time of Rambam, is about the 1400s. It may have happened earlier, but we believe the 1400s is at least when they wrote it down. But Rambam, who was the great Jewish scholar at that time, and I'm not kidding, that's what they call him, Rambam. I know it, it doesn't fit with our modern things, but apparently they thought that was a cool thing back in those days. But in the 1400s, Rambam said that the Messiah, because of who he is, has to be two people. One from the lineage of David and one from the lineage of Aaron. The problem in the 1400s is what?
You don't have the records anymore.
We don't have the records anymore at all.
Didn't Herod destroy them, and then you had the destruction of the temple following that, and then you had...
Well, part of the problem, you are right, you are correct, but I'll even make it worse. When they went to Babylon, they took all the royalty and the priests and the intellectual community of Israel all went to Babylon. And when they went to Babylon, now when they came back, everybody wanted to be Cohen. That's why Cohen is the most common Jewish name today. Everyone wanted to be Cohen, and everybody wanted to be royalty. Right? When you come back, it's like, yes, sir. You got records? No records? Of course, I'm king. Of course, I'm priest. Right? That's the way it works. Because the priest got a pretty cushy deal going, right? People bring them stuff. You don't have to work in the fields. You don't have to work hard. Play some instruments, guard the shack. That's cool. And you get some food, right? And if you're a king, it's even better. People might listen to you and obey you and do what you say. Well, except everybody is, right? Can you imagine this? And guess what? Everybody who wasn't became Samaritans. Oh, you stinky Samaritans. Right? Everybody came back were true Jews and of the lineage of Aaron and of the lineage of David. Right? And then Herod destroyed the records. So...
And then the destruction of the temple.
And then the destruction of the temple.
By the Romans.
In 70 AD. And then again, the wipeout. The big wipeout in 125. And I never can remember the name of the guy, but anyway, I think Judy... Bar-Kokhba. See, she remembers that guy. I can't remember that guy. Anyway, they had multiple... Okay, they irritated people so much they got wiped out multiple times, all right? And it destroyed their records. And so in 1400... the chance of determining who was in the lineage of David or who was in the lineage of Aaron was impossible. Unless you got DNA records, maybe. Yeah.
Question that with the Jews, with the temples being destroyed and they can't sacrifice, I've always wondered, is it because the physical building of the temple got destroyed or because the Ark of the Covenant was lost? Is that really...
The Ark hadn't been around for a long time.
Yeah, the Ark had been around for a long time. That's immaterial. The point was they were supposed to only sacrifice in Jerusalem, and God intentionally did that. Of course, God also intentionally put in that, it was only for unintentional sin. Too. If you read modern Jewish documents, and all of my Jewish information, most of the Jewish information I use that's modern for you guys, comes from the Jewish New Testament, the Jewish handbook, the Jewish something handbook. I got a copy of it. It's like this thick. And it basically talks about Jewish culture and society in the modern era and why they believe what they believe. Today, they believe that prayer, supplication, worship, prayer, and also by asking forgiveness is the way you get rid of your sin. So there is no sacrifice in their sacrificial system. The sacrificial system has become a prayer system, which...
does the prayer system allow for intentional sin?
This has always been a problem because the sacrificial system didn't. In the Jewish handbook, they specified that it doesn't. Does not. In the Mishnah Talmud specifies that it does not. So the Jewish rabbis understand this very succinctly. It may be one of the reasons that modern Judaism has kind of fallen by the wayside and become only basically a tenet of heritage rather than a tenet of belief. Maybe partially because of this, because it is very difficult for them to wrap philosophically their minds around this concept, because they're in a different sphere, but a similar sphere to the people here. Today, the people in our modern era are stuck right there. Knowledge equals salvation, right? And the knowledge is, well, there can't be a God because there's no soul. We talk about 3 parts. The modern person thinks there's only sarks. You're just a product of your chemicals, right? So, yeah, maybe Hebrews does apply, right? So let's see. In 6, but the ministry Jesus has received, this is NIV, but the ministry Jesus has received is as superior to theirs as the covenant of which he is a mediator is superior to the old one and is founded on better promises. Again, I think we did this before. I'm not going to go back over the Greek, I'm just going to go, here's the translation of the Greek. But just now he hit, or light upon as a mark to be reached, to hit the mark, bore through a public function, as much also he is a go-between of a stronger disposition, which some was legislated, placed laws over stronger announcements. I know this. Difficult in itself. Okay, so, but now he hit. In other words, Jesus reached the mark through a public function. The public function was the sacrifice. As much as also he is a go-between of a stronger disposition, which some was legislated, they placed laws over stronger announcements. In other words, epiangelos, the epiangelos, the word from the gods, the thing that was always translated at the beginning from the angels, but is from God, the word from God. Now, I wanted to talk, and I need to talk about this. The word in English. Okay, we translate it diatheke, I think that's correct, as covenant. Covenant. But the word in Greek is a disposition. Does anybody have a problem? What does disposition mean legally? I'm not talking about disposition. Your disposition is I'm friendly, I'm happy, but what's a disposition legally?
When you just love someone, you
Word status.
Not a deposition. A deposition is different.
Status comes from
It's been executed, something.
It's been executed. Yeah. A disposition legally is when something has already been. When a judge usually, or a jury, but it's usually a judge. A judge has already ruled, and the disposition is the case at the end. What is a covenant? It's ongoing.
Probably.
A covenant is a beginning. It's a contract. It is a very specific contract. We used to talk about the covenant of marriage. We should still talk about the covenant of marriage. Marriage is a covenant agreement. It both has legal stipulations and we believe spiritual, empirical spiritual things. But when I go into a covenant of marriage, there is a beginning. A disposition is an end. It means that it's already been done. So the word diatheke that we keep translating as covenant isn't really a covenant within a Greek worldview, a Greek frame. So with this in mind, let's go to 7.
Is that what they always use for covenant? Diatheke?
No.
When,
No. The word, if we were going to use the word, and I can't remember it right off the bat, and I didn't research it, okay? But if I were going to say, I would not say a diatheke for example, covenant or a marriage agreement or any agreement. For example, if I were writing down an agreement, I would not use diatheke. There's another word in Greek, very specific in Greek, that means that I'm making a contract with you.
and is that what the New Testament has used before
Yes.
for that?
The New Testament almost always uses the word diatheke. So, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
I want you to spell that word for me because I can't read your chicken scratching.
I'm sorry. Disposition or diatheke?
Diatheke.
Diatheke, D-I-A-T-H-E-K-E. It would be
Okay. Got it.
well, you can't have it that way. This is the correct, because there ain't no such thing as non-Greek Greek.
Okay, thank you.
That's diatheke. But a diatheke is translated almost always as covenant. And the applicability is this, okay? The Old Testament covenant is truly a disposition. Why? It's a done deal. It happened, right? Now, the authors of Hebrew and the authors in the New Testament have used the word diatheke within the context of the covenant because in their mind it's
done deal. Jesus brought it to an end. He fulfilled it.
it's a telos, right? And it's not just a telos, it's an intelos. It's a set telos. It happened, right? That is precisely correct. This is a way, okay, this is very interesting. This is a Greek worldview as opposed to a Hebrew worldview. The Hebrew worldview would probably say, like the English worldview is really similar to the in some ways. For example, when Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is
Here.
it's here. Yeah. We want to say, oh, it's coming. But no, Jesus said it's not just coming, it's here. In a sense, it's parallel or it's eclipsing the world. But our view in English, our English worldview, is that it's coming.
It's not arrived, it's coming.
Yeah, empirically we don't see it here. But yet Jesus said it's here. It's right here. Right? Yes, ma'am.
Jews today still think of it obviously as coming and not here. And it's really sad. Like, I had this Reformed Jewish acquaintance who used to live here, and she explained to me that the Messiah was going to come after we fixed the world and we brought justice and we made sure all the poor were taken care of and all this. And it has a name, I think it's like Tikkun Olam or something like that. And so they're looking to bring it about themselves to do it, and it's just like sad because it's so hopeless. It's never going to happen.
Yeah, well, if you think, and this is why I wanted to bring this up, because if you look at almost every religion, Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is an affirmation of history, okay? That's it. It's an affirmation of something that historically occurred. It's not a question of accepting the events, they're facts. You accept what it means, and that's the deal. Everything else is just, well, what do you want? Philosophy, ideas. I mean, Zoroastrianism is what they thought that Zostris did, and Celticism, right? It's all myth, and they knew it was myth. That's the problem with this. Because when you realize it's myth, then you got an issue, right? You got to start figuring out what you're going to do. We are kind of we're in a post-mysterion kind of culture. So what do? I mean, I would argue the only one, and this is theological, sorry, the only one, I'd argue the only one that gives you hope is Christianity. And look what Christianity has done. I mean, got rid of slavery, I would say it's got equality of people. I mean, where else do you read in the first century about free, slave, man, woman, all being equal and the same? My goodness gracious. You don't even have the Mysterion literature, even though the Mysterion believe that. Anyway, and this is beautiful stuff. In 7, this is the NIV, for if there had been nothing wrong with that first covenant, no place would have been sought for another. Now here's what it says in the Greek. For is gar, assigning a reason, if, ekinos, that one, protost, foremost. Covenant is added. The covenant is not in there. Had been, faultless, amiphetos, blameless, blameless. Then is added, should. It's not should, it's zito, to seek. To seek, no place, topos, spot. Have been sought for, zito, to seek. The is added, detros, second. So here's what it says, here's the translation of this. Assigning a reason, if that one foremost had been blameless, no spot, no place, sought a second. Pretty simple. If the first one had been without a problem, now there's a problem with that. Was there a problem with the first covenant?
No. We just couldn't.
This is a trick question.
We just couldn't do it.
It's
Well, the problem was it couldn't be attained.
Yeah.
That was the problem.
The problem was man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man's inability to do that.
The problem was people, not the covenant. Now, the Jews believe, and I think the Jews are right on, this goes back to the Jewish worldview. The Jews believe that the covenant is a explanation of the world. It's like saying, okay, you know the law of gravity? They would say the laws of the Ten Commandments and the laws of the Torah are written into the creation. And that God simply told them. It's kind of like Isaac Newton coming out and saying, hey, there's gravity, guys, right? And so you write down, hey, there's gravity. The same way when God gave to Moses the commandments and the Torah. In fact, he didn't give them the commandments. He gave them the whole thing according to the Jews. He brought down on the tablets, and they must have been heavy tablets, the whole thing. Remember, it's all a mnemonics, right? That's why we know it's mnemonics. And he brought the whole Torah down according to the Jewish people to them. The whole thing. So when he brought the whole Torah down, that was God telling the people, the Jewish people, these are the laws I have inscribed into the creation. I think that's a really cool idea. It is theological, okay, but that's their view. That is the Jewish worldview, okay? That is the worldview that our thinkers are thinking from. So therefore, it is indelibly in the creation. The Jews would say, can God annul any of the commandments? No, because God created. The only way for God to get rid of the commandments is to
Destroy the whole
Stop
thing.
being God.
well, you'd have to destroy the whole. Well, you'd have to destroy the whole thing.
The Big Bang would have to reoccur.
That is another argument. That is another, well, more than the Big Bang, but that's another argument in itself. The idea that God, that's a question. Does the Torah represent the mind of God? These are deep theological questions, guys. This is what, in a theological class, if I was teaching a theological class, these are some of the questions that you have to ask yourself, because these are deep questions. Did God create into the creation the concept, the Torah? That's what the Jews believe. Does the Torah represent the mind of God? These are beautiful thought questions, okay? The Hebraic scholars and the Jewish scholars would probably say
It's the and condition rather than the or.
well, they believe God had more latitude. Just the fact that they could ask, just the fact that you can ask this question. Remember, I got sarx, suke, and pneuma. I believe very strongly when we raised our children that I would let my children ask any question they wanted. I tried to preempt every one of their questions that I knew they were going to ask, or the ones that they weren't going to ask that I knew they wanted to know. I tried to preempt every one of their questions theologically and philosophically because I want at least them to have a basis. Because in free will, we always ask the tough questions. Many times we never want to come out with them, right? We always, everybody has times when their faith, when their belief, when their ideas, they say, am I really doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? Is God really there? Does God care? Right? We ask these questions. We never tell anybody about them, but that's part of pneuma. The fact that the Jewish rabbis would ask the question, if God came down and tried to change it, that's a great theological question. If you believe that God would try to change it, or even would have that of mind, that means that God has absolute free will.
So we have Noah.
If he wouldn't, now do you see this as a deep question? Because, well, I believe Jesus did too. But see, the Calvinists don't believe this. The Calvinists believe that we're fated, which goes back to animism and pantheonic paganism, because they believe we're fated. They don't believe in free will. Free will is an outgrowth of the concept that we, even today, you have a difficulty with free will. What is free will? So anyway, these are deep questions. I'm sorry. Anyway, that initial covenant cannot be, there's nothing wrong with the initial covenant. The problem is us. So in 8 it says, and look what it says. In 8, but God found fault with the people, this is NIV, and said, the time is coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. And it's diatheke, so a new disposition. And here's what it says in the Greek. Gar, assigning a reason. Finding fault. Metaphomai, to blame. With is added. Them, autos, it's themselves. He legoed. Behold, not behold, well, ideo. You look. The is added. Hermia, days come. Erokomai, to come. Lego, the is added. Kurios. When it's not when, it's kai. And I will make. I will soon tello. Together the point aimed at as a limit. Together the point, and I will not make. I will soon tello. I will make, a is added, kanos, a fresh diatheke, disposition, with, and it's not with, it's upon the house, the oikos, a dwelling of Israel, and upon the house, the oikos of Judah. So here it is, here's the translation. Assigning a reason to blame themselves. Assigning a reason to blame themselves. He argued. You look, periods, days come, argued Kyrios, the supreme in authority. And together the point aimed at as a limit, a fresh disposition upon the dwelling of Israel and upon the dwelling of Judah. So it's not a huge thing, but you notice he answered the question already for us. I tried to lead you into it, sorry. But the point was, there wasn't a problem with the covenant. There was a problem with the people. And you notice the words. Okay, I'm not going to find huge fault with the NIV. The NIV translation is not too bad. But you notice what it missed for us. It took out the words, the finding fault, the metaphomai, to blame, a lot stronger word than to find fault, right? And the other one is, well, I missed the legos, which I don't like anyway, but the other one was the suntello. Together, and think about this. Who is the audience? The audience is not just the Hebrews. The audience is all of these folks. What are they all seeking? the sun telos. Together telos, right? A telos, by definition, is a limit, but a telos with nothing specifying it, okay, could be anything along this line, right? It's a limit, but it can be a limit on a line. A line is a limit, right? But what are we looking for? Together telos. The singular telos that answers the questions, right? As a matter of fact, that's the famous question. Remember the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? What does it mean to life and everything? It's
42.
42, right? 6 times 7. This is a joke, but it is humanity. This is the joke this is the point that everyone's looking for. This is what, we would hope that people would be able to turn, animals do animal things because they're programmed to do it. But in a culture like ours, the point is to think and to apply ourselves in ways to understand. And we believe, like Socrates and the Greeks and the Romans, right, that knowledge will lead you to the truth. And that's what they're seeking. They're seeking us to tell us. Let's look at 9. I can't do that. Before that, I have to go to Jeremiah 31. Jeremiah 31 is where this quote comes from. I won't read the whole thing, but I will give it to you. Let's start in... it's talking in Jeremiah, at the beginning it says, in 1, "At that time, declares the Lord, I will be the God of all the clans of Israel, and they will be my people. And this is what the Lord says," etc., etc., etc. This is what the Lord says in 2, "The people who survive the sword will find favor in the desert. I will come to give rest to Israel." Where are they living? In Alexandria. It's kind of a desert. It's not perfectly a desert, but it's... Has anyone been to Egypt? Have you seen Egypt before? I've been to Egypt multiple times. Down there, you look at the Nile, and there's this little piece of strip that's kind of got some green in it. It's not as green as you think. You'd think it'd be like lush. It's not. It's just kind of greenish, brownish, right? But all on either side is all desert. It's all brown. These guys are in the desert. This is what the Lord says. "The people who survive the sword will find favor in the desert. I will come to give the rest to Israel." 3, "The Lord appeared to us in the past, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with loving kindness. 4, I will build you up again, and you will be rebuilt, O Virgin Israel. Again, you will take up your tambourines and go out and dance with the joyful. 5, again, you will plant vineyards in the hills of Samaria. The farmers will plant them and enjoy their fruit." Samaria. Samaria. What's in New Samaria?
Samaria, isn't that Iraq? Isn't that Mesopotamia?
Well, it's supposed to be kind of between the Samaria. Well, that's my point. What is Samaria? I mean, there was a place that was Samaria. Remember, Jesus met the Samaritan woman?
Where the people are all mixed.
It's between Galilee and Judah.
Well, it's supposed to be, right? But where is it really? It's where they'll let the Samaritans live, right? Because the Samaritans are who?
Yeah,
No, they're not.
Jews who've been kind of muddied or mixed with the others.
No, they're not. They're the ones. Okay, when the Assyrians came, they took everyone because that was the philosophy of the time. When the Babylonians came, who did they take? The elite, the managers, the leaders, the royalty. They took them all. Man, they castrated the royalty. You remember that? Daniel's castrated. All those guys were castrated, so they couldn't reproduce. So guess what? You didn't have any royalty. Okay? The priests, they probably did the same thing. The point is, everybody who went were elite. Who was left? Usins. The middle class, the regular folks. Everybody who wasn't elite. Right? So the swamp went to Babylon. Where's the swamp? That's pretty cool. In any case, who came back? The elite. And who were the Samaritans?
How long were they in Babylon? Okay, if they were castrated, how were they able to come back? They would have been dead.
Well, the women are still
Probably
there.
just the ones who were
Because
in
the
the
women.
port, right?
What's that?
Probably just the ones who were in the port, right?
That is a great question, because that has not been answered historically very well. But they brought women. They brought the women, the elites, so therefore the women, and they're mixed. And who is the mixed blood here?
Probably Babylonian.
The ones coming back were their children were Babylonian, almost. Okay,
They
you
have to be almost exclusive.
well you can figure it out. Well, remember, how is the Jewish? Where does the Jewish line come from? The mommy, not the daddy. So you get rid of the daddies, and they didn't have any daddies. Matter of fact, the daddies were probably Babylonian officials.
But my point is,
Yeah.
the people that went to Babylonia,
Yeah.
they were the aristocracy. They were the elite.
Yep.
Their children, they couldn't have fathered them, so the children were fathered by the Babylonians. So how could they have been elite when they came back?
Because they said they were.
Okay.
You know, and because the mother, we've got this father thing in our culture, but it's the mothers, in the Hebrew culture, right? I mean, we brought up a whole bunch of really cool questions, both intentionally and unintentionally, but this is really important stuff. Contemplate, and let's think about this. The ones that came back were the more muddied probably than those that were here, and yet they're Samaritans. Thank you, Father God, for your word. We pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray, amen.
Lionel?
Yes, sir.
But in Esther was the daughter of Mordecai's uncle. They were cousins, so, and there had